Hey, this man Tony Wiggins. It seems the Jags have gotten all the miles they could out of Jack and told Miles to hit the road. Jack, he's no longer a member of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'll tell you the impact of yesterday's signings and what it means moving forward at that position and other positions here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Jaguars. Stand by.
You are Locked On Jags, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, good people? Thank you for joining me today here on Locked On Jaguars. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of Locked On Jaguars. I've covered the team for about 11 years. To all of those here for the first time, hello. Welcome to Locked On Jaguars. It's your team every day, and we thank you for making us your first listen here every day, because this is what we do. We bring you Jaguars content, try to do it organically and not sound like everybody else, and just like not being like everybody else. We're also free on all platforms, including YouTube or wherever else you get your podcast. Let's not bury the lead today. The Jaguars this morning, it's in fact right before, as I was preparing to record, I had to switch up a little bit. The Jags have released linebacker Myles Jack, who has been a staple of this defense ever since he was drafted in 2016. He's like one of the last of the Mohicans of that defense, and that starting defense that was so good in 2017. Had a nice little run here in Jacksonville, was dead in the middle of a contract extension on the second deal. The Jags will save about $8 million. You would think that yesterday's signing of the gentleman that I call Foy Alou, because I don't want to rip his name to shreds, has a lot to do with it. A 3-year, $45 million contract for the new linebacker who came from Atlanta. Now, there's some talk that, okay, well, they signed him, it should have been writing on the wall that they were moving on. That's not necessarily true, because the way that Mike Caldwell ran his defense in Tampa, you had two guys in Devin White, even though he's a traditional Mike linebacker, he's fast, who also played next to Levante David. I go back and think about the days in San Francisco when Trent Baalke was there, where they took they had Patrick Willis, who was a pure Mike, and then they had Navarro Bowman, who had been a weak side linebacker and a strong side linebacker, and he also played inside linebacker. So it's a little bit, murky, and you wonder, like, is it a true Mike? Is it a true Will? No, it's more or less inside a linebacker and Will linebacker, and they sort of have some of these same responsibilities. So now you can look forward to the Jaguars either doing two things: filling that position with someone else in free agency, which I doubt they do, just elevating Shaq Quarterman, who is a pure Mike linebacker. That's what he was at Miami, and maybe they like him, and maybe they've seen something from his development. Or this does open the door for them in the draft, since they filled so many holes with other spots. This opens the door for them in the draft to target maybe the Nakobe Deans, if they could get somewhere close to the back end of the first round or towards the middle. Brian Asamoah out of Oklahoma, Chad Muma, who played at Wyoming, Christian Harris, who I've mentioned. But I knew that they needed some runners and some thumpers at that position. So we'll just keep our eye on that situation a little bit. But Myles Jack, I wouldn't say he had a great career here, but he had a very, very solid career, and will be remembered as a guy who everybody pretty much liked on and off the field. They always seemed to want a little bit more from him. I think one of the things that hurt Myles is when he was given an opportunity to have that captain stamp on his helmet, it just never went well. And he even laughed about it. And to me, sometimes what that could mean is that a guy is just a football player based on instincts, and he's just not a leader. And I think the Jaguars may at some point realize that Myles didn't have that value. And he also when he signed his deal, he signed his extension to be a middle linebacker. So he was always, in my opinion, overpaid to be a guy who was just strictly going to be a weak side linebacker. And the Jaguars have moved on. So they freed up some cap space to continue doing what they were doing all day yesterday. And forgive me, as soon as I started talking, guys want to do the lawn outside, but shout out to the guys who do the lawn outside, and shout out to me for being able to live in a place where people cut my grass. But Hopefully that doesn't bother you. You might not hear it at all with this great technology we have. But anywho, we're going to move on. The Jaguars signed a bunch of guys yesterday. We're going to do a quick recap. Brandon Scherf, guard. Looks like it was a 3-year, $49 million deal with $30 million guaranteed, which in my opinion is a bargain. Of course, the signing that sent everybody through the moon was the Christian Kirk signing, because it was reported it was a 4-year, up to $84 million. Turns out it's $37 million guaranteed over the first 2 years, and then the Jaguars can move on without hurting themselves too bad after that if he pans out. If he doesn't pan out, but if he does pan out, then instead of paying that high amount of money in the third year, which I think it's $16 million, and then there's roster bonuses, so it could be up or $20 million. That's where you just go ahead and restructure and give him more guaranteed money and stretch it out a little bit further. So we beat up on Trent Baalke for a lot of things. I won't beat up on him for those signings. There are a lot of people around the league, though, that are angry. But what I want them to do is, unless you're a team like Cincinnati, whose number 1 and number 2 receivers were guys that were picked in the last 2 years of the draft, I want you to go around the league and look at the amount of money that the second receivers make on teams, and the second receiver is a veteran or a guy who's been there for a while. I'll give you one right now, Robert Woods. Robert Woods gets paid, and Cooper Kupp is the best. So if you have a team with Cooper Kupp on it, who people says is one of the 2 best receivers in the league, you probably wonder why a team would pay Robert Woods so much money. 1, because he's a good player, and 2, because they can. And I think the Jaguar fans and some of the people around the league don't get and understand that it's $7.5 million, I believe, the first year for Christian Kirk. DJ Chark under a tag or a 1-year deal would have been $16 million here. You want to know whether it's worth it or not? DJ Chark signed with Detroit for $10 million, fully guaranteed. That's a Dante Moncrief contract. That does not indicate that this dude's market was worth you paying him $16 million under the franchise tag. It doesn't indicate that this dude was worth giving a long-term extension. See, we have this familiarity complex, and I warned folks about this before. When you get a new coach and a new staff in here, what you all wanted, new people, new voices, new eyes, new ears, they're going to let go of people that you know. You see that today with Myles, and you've seen it yesterday with DJ Chark. The example I'll use is selling a house. You selling a house, and there's sentimental value, with there's a carving on a paneling in one of your rooms. Oh, that's where little Toby carved himself. He carved that up there. That's a picture of him in the hospital bed because he broke his arm. So he carved that in there for memory. That means so much to me. Don't mean a damn thing to the next person that's about to buy your house. That panel is coming off that wall, and you and Toby can take it with you if you want to. That's the way this works. It's not about what it means to you. It's about what it means to everyone else. Now, they could be wrong in their assessment of the value. That's fine. But that doesn't matter. It's about what they're willing to pay you and what they're giving you. They're never going to give you what you think you deserve for something. And when you just assume that I had somebody hit me up, why didn't they try to trade Myles? How do you know they didn't? How do you know they didn't? You don't know what they did. And the market will bear out what happened. And DJ Chark signed a 1-year, $10 million deal, which is very similar to the deal that the Jaguars gave Dante Moncrief several years ago. Prove it. Prove it. It's not about where he was picked. It's not about his upside. It's not about all the circumstances and the situations that led him to not be productive. Nobody cares on the open market. So that's what we have to assess. Segment 2, I'm going to ask, just go through it and say, did they get better? Did they get better, and how much better did they get? Segment 3, what's next in the draft or in free agency? And I was jokingly telling somebody I might be doing my show and breaking news happens. I might be breaking news while I'm actually recording because of the way this is moving and how fast this is going for the Jaguars. In fact, I'm about to check right now to see if anything has happened since I've been on the air, because they're absolutely moving at warp speed. They said they were going to be really, really aggressive. And I know I'm going to tell y'all when I come back in segment 2 how I joke, and I joked a lot yesterday about Trent Baalke and how you guys may end up loving Trent Baalke. After all, I was being facetious and tongue-in-cheek. But we'll do more of that And we'll get into segment 2 about have they gotten better, where have they gotten better, what else they need to do to improve, and if any of that stuff is good enough. We'll do it in just a second here on the Tuesday edition. Jaguars. After I tell you this, that it's time now for you to start looking at college basketball in those brackets. It's that time of year. It is time for you to get your betting in line, and the only place you can do that is at betonline.net. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, betonline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. It's not just basketball. Online, betonline.net is the continued source for all of your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Now, the NBA is hot and heavy too right now, heading into the playoffs. So you guys might want to focus on hoops and might want to do a little bit of research to make sure that you put your money where it needs to go. The place to do that is at betonline.net. So you need to head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Where your podcasting starts is with me here every single day on Locked On Jaguars. We appreciate you making us your first listen. Have the Jags gotten better? Yes, they did. They got better in the sense that they addressed some things that folks really sort of ignored. Like I call them the mob, but the mob, they wanted wide receivers. They wanted the Jaguars. I saw somebody jokingly tweet out that the first 6 things that the Jaguars should do is sign wide receivers, and the first 3 things they should draft is draft wide receivers. And I know that that's just joking around, but people really just like, if you mention anything, I mentioned earlier this year, the Jags need to fix their offensive line. And I had 12 people tell me, pause. The first thing you need to do is fix their wide receivers. This has never been about what happens first. Like, your biggest signing doesn't have to be your first signing. And you don't have to focus on one thing at a time. And that's what I've been saying that all offseason. So when the Jaguars addressed the defensive line yesterday, it did not surprise me. I was very, very happy about that. One is because I don't think interior defensive line is heavy in the draft. I think you need to always pay attention to what's there and what's not. If you think you needed a bump up in size and girth and the ability to play the way you want to play, if we're using Tampa as I know before it was all about Baltimore, but if we're using Tampa as the example, Tampa had 2 real big guys up front in Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh that kept blocks off of their linebackers who were allowed to run and flow to the ball. They needed guys who could also not just take up space, but create pressure up the middle, as well as play more than one gap. And I think that that's what they've done with with Devon Hamilton already being on the roster, and then them going out yesterday and getting. I don't want to screw this dude's name up either, man. I'll just call him Saka. Okay, they went out and got him yesterday. So now you got 2 guys, 6'4", and going with Malcolm Brown if they keep him. You got 3 guys in that 320-pound range and 325 that can really. I think Devon Hamilton's 330. They're big, they're physical, they can 1 gap, they can 2 gap. One guy can play the big defensive end spot, not the old 5B defensive end, but they can line them up as a nose, a defensive lineman, a defensive tackle, defensive end, which is a lot of times they do in a 3-man set or a 3-man front. It gives you the flexibility if you go to a 4-man front in nickel packages and you put down linemen and edge rushers with their hand on the ground, that you got guys that are both good at the run and good at being able to apply pressure. You just need guys that won't get worn down and that could keep people off of your running back. So I do think they got better in that respect. In terms of the wide receivers with Christian Kirk, they got better. Christian Kirk's a better player than a lot of people are giving him credit for. You caught 70 balls for 900 yards, and people are saying he couldn't catch 1,000 yards if he was on the other side of D-Hop. You ain't supposed to catch 1,000 yards if you're on the other side of D-Hop, because D-Hop's going to get the ball whether he's open or not. So I do think if you watch the tape, how he gets in and out of his breaks, how he can run after the catch. He had some drops. A lot of people do. It's the NFL. He's got to clean that up a little bit. But I think if overall he puts up the same numbers or close to it, but this team wins and they elevate, people will think that the money is worth it. If they don't win, I don't care if he catches for 1,100 yards. If he doesn't win, nobody's going to care. If this team doesn't elevate and start winning as a collective. So with that being said, I like it. I was pulling for them to get Cedric Wilson. They didn't. They went and got Zay Jones. Zay Jones is athletic, young, was a former first-round pick, or maybe a first-round pick in Buffalo. Might have been a second-round pick. Dad, Robert Jones, played in the NFL for a long time linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys. He's a professional pass catcher. That's what I'll tell you. And they didn't pay a lot of money for him. A professional pass catcher who adds speed and athleticism to a unit that needed speed, athleticism, and separation. So he does a real good job of tracking the ball, too. So having Zay Jones on your team as probably the fourth wide receiver or an additional guy who can play the slot if you want to line Kirk up outside in certain situations, that is not bad. Now, do I think they're done at receiver? I don't. They could go out and get another veteran out there, but I really think they're going after one of those young cats in the draft. I think they're going to try to get an ex receiver in the draft and try to groom him. They're going to probably I wouldn't be surprised if they moved Laviska Shenault. I had little birdie told me back in not too long ago that there were a couple of teams and players that would be prime destinations for him, like the Raiders and probably the Patriots. And the connection that those two teams have to each other now that Josh McDaniels is in Las Vegas kind of tells you where I'm going with that. But I do think they got better. I think they got better at linebacker. I think they got faster. I think this linebacker is going to be Foy is going to be the type of guy that Mike Caldwell wants in the middle of his defense. So what's left to be done? I mean, with the 5 additions, with the 2 receivers, the defensive lineman, the linebacker, and the guard, what's left for them to do? I think they're positioning themselves, and they probably will do some more stuff in free agency too, but they're really positioning themselves to take the best player in the draft based on who they think it is. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios here and what it might mean. This is not something I've heard. This is something that's for us to ponder and throw out. What if they make another splash signing? Like if they trade for Lyle Collins, or if they sign Chandler Jones to a big-time contract, or Randy Gregory. What would that mean? I'll give you some ideas of what it might mean and how you can start to wrap some of this stuff around your head. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's just stuff that will brace you for any surprises that may or may not occur. And I'll do it here in the final segment on a Tuesday on Locked On Jaguars after I tell you guys about rockauto.com. This is really, really important. With the increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all parts that you might need. Why endure often pointless and seemingly intimidating questions like, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? Like, who knows that kind of stuff? I ain't no mechanic or no engineer. And wait for the person behind the counter to order parts from their computer, choosing the only brand the warehouse happens to carry. When you have computer access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket, and you can do it yourself. And I really, really, truly mean that. And with the way things have been with parts and everything running behind, you don't have that problem at rockauto.com that you might have at some other places. So you'll save time and money when using rockauto.com, and you'll spend less money and it'll be less hassle. And Rock Auto is also a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you could need, from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. It's amazing selection with reliably low prices. All the parts your car will ever need are at rockauto.com. And you're with us here because you make us your first listen every single day. I got a couple of second listens for you. How about Locked On NFL YouTube? Check us out on YouTube on the Locked On NFL YouTube page. Every single day, I'll be on tomorrow with James Rapine, where we give you all the news and notes from around the NFL and the big stories. And right now, it's very imperative and it's important for you to pay attention to the Locked On NFL Draft with my man Eric Crocker and Ryan Tracy, because they break it down like no others, and they give you in-depth information about draft choices, and you're going to really, really need that. That's a daily podcast. Both of those, make sure you check them out, like, and subscribe. because we're going to talk a little draft here in segment 3, but we're going to do it with the sense of thinking about free agency. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that I did my mocks last week and I did these scenarios where I put the free agency and the draft together, because it's hard to do one without doing the other one first. And I know if a lot of you guys did mock drafts last night, they're becoming pretty clear now, and they're easier for you to do in a sense, because it's hard to really know what other teams are going to do. So you kind of let the computer do that work for you. But if, and these are the tells that we were talking about also, if the Jaguars, if you hear them attached to Chandler Jones, what would that mean? Does that necessarily mean that they're not taking Aiden Hutchinson? It does not. It could mean that they're shopping Josh Allen. The same way you would be surprised, or you were surprised about them releasing Myles Jack, that could happen as well. Remember, it's not about familiarity. It's about what they envision and as the best thing for the team. Now, you ask, what would the advantages be to doing that? The advantages are you would get a proven player like Chandler Jones with immediate impact. You would move Myles Jack a year before you'd have to make a decision on an extension or a fifth-year option. You wouldn't sign Chandler Jones or draft Aiden Hutchinson if you thought if you thought Josh Allen was a pure alpha number 1 pass rusher. If that's the case, you would probably address your team in another area. I personally believe, because of what I have heard, that they do not believe that Josh Allen is a true number 1 alpha defensive end, that he needs to be a complementary player. If you can get 2 guys that are both alphas in, say, Chandler Jones or Randy Gregory, and then draft Aiden Hutchinson, now you don't need a guy who's just solely dependent on someone on the other side, and you're not going to have to be faced with a decision a year from now about a fifth-year option or an extension. You can just pay Chandler Jones for the next 3 years, get your alpha in Aiden Hutchinson, come back in the second or maybe the third round, and get a guy that you can develop like a Myjai Sanders and bring him along, right? Or an Arnold Ebiketie and bring them along and have them as your third rusher, because I don't think Caleb Vaughn is going to get better. I'm sorry. And then as your third, you still have DeJuan Smoot also, but have that guy in development just in case Chandler Jones starts to get older. You plug a guy right in and it becomes like baseball, like a farm system, where you're getting a guy with production and you have him on your staff already. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is if they go out and you keep hearing them attached to Lyle Collins or Chandler Jones or both. That doesn't mean they're going to take Aiden Hutchinson in the draft. That could mean that they could decide to rescind the tag on Cam Robinson, take Chandler Jones, keep Josh Allen, rescind the tag on Chandler on Cam Robinson, sign Teron Armstead, or take Lyle Collins, play Lyle Collins at left guard or right tackle, and then decide that you're going to draft one of those 2 offensive linemen at the top. Third scenario, keep Cam Robinson, trade for Lyle Collins, play him at left guard, leave Linder at center, of course. Brandon Scherf can still be the right guard. Of course, he will be the right guard. And then your right tackle can be Walker Little or Jawan Taylor or whoever wins. Move back in the draft because now you already have your 2 bookend pass rushers. So you drop back no later than 3. You start a bidding war between Houston and Detroit for the number 1 pick. And you sit at number 3 and you take that safety from Notre Dame. All of these things can happen. But at the end of the day, the Jaguars need to feel they got the best player in the draft last year. They're going to get the best player in the draft this year. They're going to get guys that are in the top 10 at their respective positions to come in this season in Brandon Scherf and in Chandler Jones. And then whatever extra draft capital they get from moving back, they take their 3 second-round picks that they'd have at that point, either move back up into the first round and take Jameson Williams, sit where you are and take George Pickens or Christian Watson. We don't know what the plan is. Let's just see what it is. But those are some possible scenarios. And I knew I threw a lot of stuff out there. But I'm telling you, they have their eyes set on someone in the draft, and a lot of things that they're doing, they're able to do because they know they got their eyes set on somebody. I'm telling you, this is the way it works. You can do free agency, but you can do them. You have to make these things work together. So don't be surprised at anything from this point you see with the Jaguars. Now, I don't know of any information that they're going to trade Josh Allen. I don't. And that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm telling you is I know for a fact that some very important people in that building do not believe that he is an act-alone pass rusher who makes the other guy on the other. He's not going to make Caleb Vaughn. If somebody's going to make Caleb Vaughn, it ain't going to be Josh Allen. Josh Allen needs somebody on the other side of him to make him better. And we've seen that. He played better when he had Calais and when he had Yannick. He hasn't been able to do anything since those guys have been gone. That's it. So we're going to see what's going on, man. We got a lot going on here on Locked On Jaguars. You guys make sure you stay tuned in to all the updates. I give periodic updates throughout the day. They're little clips. They last about 45 seconds. So if anything happens, I'll be dropping those as well. But until tomorrow, you guys keep buckle your seatbelts, man, because I got a feeling that the Jaguars are going to keep being mentioned. And don't worry about those haters out there talking about overpayment. Last thing, I gotta add this. Do we need to do another class on the difference between annual per year and salary cap? Because I think that's what people are getting screwed on. Let me tell you what the only big thing is about that huge number that you see. The huge number that you see when guys say they signed a 5-year, $120 million deal. The significance of the contract is really the upfront money and the guaranteed money. The significance of that big number that you hear is generally guys will ask for the guarantee to be a percentage of that big number. So that's why agents have that big number pushed up higher, because what it does is if you have in your mind that a percentage of whatever that big number is going to be your signing bonus, so you try to escalate or elevate that number. So for every $1 million that number goes up, that's only about another actual $500,000 in guaranteed money, right? So the difference between a $90 million deal and a $100 million deal is $1 million in guaranteed money. You got me? That's pretty much the way it works. Because a $900 million deal, if you're going to get 60% of it guaranteed, $90 million deal, you're going to ask for $54 million guaranteed. And I'm just going 60% as a ballpark. If you want a $100 million deal, it's going to be $60 million in guaranteed money, right? So that's a difference of $6 million because you actually went up $10 million. So basically, for every $1 million, it's between $500,000 and $600,000 that you're trying to get guaranteed. That's why that big number is important. The annual per year does not matter, because normally when you look at these contracts, the last year or two, there are balloon salaries and balloon bonuses and balloon payments that usually make up about 40% of the deal that these guys are never, ever going to see unless they sign an extension and they can get the cap number back down. That's what DeMarcus Lawrence did. DeMarcus Lawrence had gotten like $60 million of his guaranteed money over his $105 million contract. He had like $45 million left under contract under 2 years. Dallas didn't want to pay him the average of $22 million a year. So what they did was he signed a 3-year extension. He got those $40 million guaranteed that was left under the contract. But now it lowers his annual per year and salary cap hit because he stretched it out for 3 years. Probably he'll never see at least 2 of those years, but he got that $40 million for the next 3 years. The last 2 years he had under his deal and the other year, he got it guaranteed. So you say, well, why didn't he just say, no, release me? Okay, you release him. Is somebody else going to give him guaranteed $40 million right now? And is he going to be happy? That's it. Salary cap 101. I see guys that are veterans at this. They keep posting annual per year. Do you give him $21 million? How could you do? You ain't getting $21 million. You got $37 million guaranteed. That's what he got. And if they're going to keep him at the third year, they're probably going to extend him, give him another $5 million guarantee or $8 million guaranteed or whatever, and stretch it out for 2 more years, or $15 million and stretch it out for 2 more years. And then he'll have a 4-year, $53 million deal, and it'll look the way by the time he finishes playing here, Christian Kirk would have made $55 million over 4 years. That's not $21 million a year. Y'all need to explain this to people and stop using that stuff as clickbait. It makes no sense. Does make sense for you to join me here again on Locked On Jaguars. We'll do it again tomorrow. Same time, same place. You guys take care of each other.